Hey, welcome back to the Ready State. Recently we had a great piece about understanding rotation and trying to identify limits of rotation as keys of compensation, which means if I can't see and I'm not accustomed to seeing these kind of rotational dumps, the sort of lack of ability to create a stable position or move towards a stable position as part of my understanding of movement, then I'm missing a lot of opportunity to create increased force, increased power. So one of the things we talk about a lot is making sure that we have full physiologic range. And that means that there's a lot of complexity happening in the joint, right? The joint is rolling, sliding, and gliding, but it's also rotating. And if we don't begin to get better at accounting for making sure we're not just practicing rotation, but we're seeing the expression of rotation happen, then oftentimes we're leaving a lot of performance on the table and potentially putting joints and tissues into positions where they can be more easily overworked, not necessarily overworked, but this is again about power. This is again about wattage and output. So one of the things that we talk about is being able to have this motion, particularly at the shoulder. It's really easy to see. And if you've ever bench pressed before and seen someone flare their elbows, that's what I'm talking about. That flare is moving away from a more stable shape, a more effective transfer of power shape into a dump shape. And it can happen for a lot of reasons. I'm missing rotation in the shoulder. I'm missing the ability to extend the shoulder, right? I'm just not really good at that, right? Maybe I just never practiced that. And so, as soon as my friends say, hey, keep your elbows tucked or make sure that your elbow stays under your wrist as long as you can in that bottom position, I'd be able to figure this out. But more importantly, we want to be able to identify and be able to appreciate that when we practice a movement like putting a dumbbell over my head, this is fine to put a dumbbell over my head in this position. This is why people love this shape. Go from a real mid-range shape to another mid-range shape, and I don't even have to straighten the elbow out. I can get some work done, right? Great. Except it doesn't teach me to create rotation the way I have to under high speed or have to under high load, the way that some of the Olympic lifting teaches, right? And one of the reasons we love to press dumbbells with thumb backwards is it forces us to confront some of these rotational issues and be able to quickly see, does my athlete have access to this position? Because what we're trying to do is have athletes be able to move into more stable positions, which are, again, more effective at transferring power and efficiency over 1 rep or 1,000 reps. But also, if I can't see it, that's an issue, and I want to be able to identify that. So one of the things that we love to see then is what are some simple tests and expressions of that. So imagine I finish a pull-up, I'm at the bottom position of the pull-up, and elbows bend. It's difficult for me to capture a lot of force development through the shoulder unless that elbow is moving towards an external rotated position. So this torsion that I'm creating at the bottom of trying to be wound up and stable in this bottom shape, right, is really, really a powerful idea, because now I'm not just hanging on tissues and momentum, I'm able to get my power on and use the whole force of the system, which means I can generate force longer and have larger sort of impulse that begins sooner. So instead of waiting, because I'm just not very strong in this position, waiting for my body to spin and then be able to pull, I'm always looking at, can I create a more stable position to absorb force and create a more stable position to return force. So one of the reasons that we love to cast away and say, hey, elbows in a little bit, is that when I arrive in the bottom position, I've wound up that shoulder into a more stable position, which is going to transfer into practice for other things, right? Pressing overhead for the same example. Well, the SkiErg is a wonderful tester of this, because you can see that I'm automatically blocked into this position of thumb back on the SkiErg by being able to generate power in this position. Now, there's going to be plenty of variability in my motion and my return, but one of the things we're looking at is as I come back up to the catch, if my elbows are wide, as we often see, totally legit, but I'm looking at how soon my athletes can get into this stable position. And the more my torso comes over in a hinge, the more shoulder flexion is going to be required in this position, which looks a lot like holding a barbell over my head, thumb backward, trying to create some active rotation, right? And the idea here is that it's easy to see all of a sudden, because if I'm into this catch position and my elbows flare, it takes me a long time to get back to a mid-range where I can be adding that power through that external rotation. This is why we teach bend the bar, break the bar. So at the top here, the sooner I can be moving towards this externally rotated position, I'm going to be able to accumulate a more stable mechanic and generate force more quickly. So what's nice about that is that, again, we move this conversation away from, hey, this is safe, this is unsafe, to this position allows me better energy transfer at the catch, at the instigation of the movement, instead of developing that power later in the movement. You may have seen the same thing in rowing. If I'm slow at the catch, develop this stable shape, I'm not going to be able to transfer energy. It's going to take me a second, then I lose precious time and range of motion to generate power. We're looking at, with motions like this, to be able to teach people to apply force, not in a tiny range, but continually through range. So I grab something, I want to just not jerk on it for a second, I want to be able to push the whole time. Keep adding power that whole time. So begin to see this rotation. Use the elbow as a good cue. And if you're doing ring rows, same thing. Wrist and elbow will tell you a lot of what's going on. We know the hand is clever, but this rotation is something we've got to get better at seeing. And more importantly, repetition without repetition demands that we see it everywhere we go. So we're giving our athletes consistent cues, because if this is my catch, right? Then what's going to happen when I have to put something over my head? Well, I've just practiced this thousands and thousands of times. Rotation matters. See it. You got this.